Welcome back to the Empowering America podcast, the podcast that focuses on energy, naturally, brought to you by the Empowerment Alliance. In the fight to ensure America's access to clean, affordable, reliable, and abundant natural gas, we speak with the biggest players in energy every week. Join us as we interview the heroes who are continuing the natural gas revolution and continue fighting back against the Green New Deal and other green at any cost policies that unnecessarily inject risk into our country's energy security. Now your host, Executive Director of the Empowerment Alliance, Matt Hammond.
Hello, and welcome back to episode 11 of the Empowering America podcast. I'm your host, Matt Hammond, Executive Director of the Empowerment Alliance. And today I have the privilege of being joined by the Attorney General of West Virginia, Patrick Morrisey. Patrick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Matt. It's really a privilege to be with you because there's so much going on in the energy space across our country right now. And obviously my office in West Virginia, we seem to be in the middle of virtually every major issue pending. So it's great to come in, talk about what we're working on, but also what you guys are doing as well, because I think T is doing some pretty incredible things. And I really want to applaud you for these efforts, not only on the podcast, but to get the message out about the importance of natural gas and also why it's so critical to stop a lot of this federal overreach that's coming from the Biden administration.
Yeah, that's all very well said. And Patrick, I appreciate the compliments of T. So why don't we kind of get into, You talk about West Virginia being at the center of all this, and there's clearly a lot of development going on, and natural gas is playing a big role in your state's economy. But can we talk maybe a little bit from, you can touch base energy, environment, whatever it might be. What are the big issues facing the state of West Virginia right now?
Absolutely. So West Virginia is an amazing place for all those who are watching. We feel very fortunate. We're one of the most beautiful states in the nation. And I think we have an awful lot of positive things going on. We're within 10 hours of 180 million people. That means that markets are available when you come and you're locating in West Virginia. We've got the most incredible people. Folks know that. West Virginians are generous. They're kind, they're very friendly, and they have a lot of pride in their state. And of course, we're also blessed with a bounty of energy resources and natural beauty. It's a great place for tourism. It's also a place where West Virginia can really serve as a center point for how energy is going to develop in the upcoming decades. I'm really thrilled that West Virginia is at the center of a lot of these big policy debates, but right now in West Virginia, there is so much going on. It's an incredible state. We are taking on a number of challenges here in the AG's office. We're doing a lot to fight the opioid epidemic in West Virginia. That's been a big issue. Obviously, we've been supportive of building out the infrastructure in our state. And by that, I not only mean roads and bridges, but internet infrastructure. I think we saw during COVID when everyone was trying to put mandates in place and folks wanted to come and relocate to a more beautiful area and a place that wasn't as stringent in terms of these command and control systems from government, people decided to come to West Virginia. Well, to make that effective move, you need to have good broadband. So that's been out there. And then, of course, maintaining affordable energy. That's always at or near the top of the list because West Virginia, with its coal resources, its oil, its gas, we know we're sitting on Utica and Marcellus shale, and we just have to find a way to get a lot of that good gas out across the country. And I know there's been a lot of debates about that in terms of pipelines, in terms of different types of policies. So there's a lot going on in West Virginia, and I feel very fortunate to be here today and talk about some of those issues.
Yeah, no, and I think a lot of the things that you just talked about, me being in Ohio, a lot of the struggles that we've had, but also great opportunity too with Utica, Marcellus development, mostly Utica here, of course. And you get to the point about energy, and I think it's such a unique, how quickly things have changed in the energy space over the last 2 years. right? And now affordability is becoming a really big issue. And I've got to believe that, I hear it when I go to fill up my car at the pump in Ohio, and I see people just kind of roll their eyes and, scratch their head at how expensive gasoline is right now.
Sure.
I got to believe it's a very similar experience in West Virginia as well.
Well, it is. And I think what people have seen over the last 12 to 16 months is the price of energy has gone through the roof. And a lot of that is because of the decisions that have been made consciously by the Biden administration. People have to step back and remember that this was an administration on day one said it wants to close the Keystone pipeline. They wanted to do the social cost of carbon. They wanted to do a broad climate change proposal. They wanted to have a moratorium in place, not only for coal, but oil and gas on federal lands. The list goes on and on and on. And because of all those policies and the way that the administration has handled itself, you've seen tremendous inflation, and obviously energy is driving that. So what you pay at the pump, or of course, what you pay at the power bill when you get your bill, because as people are moving in different directions and they're trying to suffocate coal and gas and move everyone to renewables under timelines that are not realistic at all, then that's when you see consumers pay through the nose in terms of the power bills. And that really affects West Virginia very deeply, because as you move further away from kind of the energy sources that we have, that we produce in abundance, and you start to move in other areas, a lot of people are going to pay an awful lot of money for that transition. And I'm deeply worried about that.
Yeah, you think so. It's early August. It feels like 100 degrees in Columbus today. But we all know how quickly the weather turns
Oh, yeah.
in this area. And before you know it, it's going to be cold, and people are going to need to heat their homes with a
That's
lot of
right.
natural gas, and they're going to feel those prices then too.
Well, they are. And in fact, I know that in April of 21, when Biden came out with his climate change proposal, we noted that he wanted to cut natural gas capacity by 50%. And so when you do things like that, and you're trying to eliminate coal, when you're doing all these other things, well, price has to skyrocket. And I think that's why you're seeing inflation rise at the level that it does. And when you tack on all these new bills that they're trying to push forward, including the most recent one, the Build Back Better 2, I know they're trying to call it something different. They're trying to argue when you spend a lot of money, you hike a lot of taxes, it's not causing a rise in inflation. Trust me, this bill is going to cause inflation to get even worse. And so, yes, energy issues have driven a lot of the problems that we've seen in our country. And in West Virginia, we're very worried about it because our economy had been coming back, and we've been doing things, and we're trying to diversify and change our tax code and do things that will help our country or help our state become economically powerful. And then the feds come, it seems like they're just slapping us back every time.
Yeah, and you talk about cutting back natural gas development and but power generation as well, the capacity of it all. You don't have to do that when emissions have been reducing over time in the United States. We are a leader of reducing carbon emissions in this world. And
we are. And in fact, if you look at a lot of the proposals, it seems like Biden and Obama prior, everyone wanted to have this one-sided approach where America is forced to cut. Meanwhile, you see what China is doing, what India is doing, what Germany is doing, and everyone's going in the opposite direction. So wouldn't it be nice for a change to have everyone work to catch up to how good America's been, as opposed to have America all the time always sacrificing and putting a lot of communities at risk? So I know that we're always working to get those messages out, not only about the AG community, but across the country, because it's so critical that we let people know how utterly absurd these green policies are coming from Washington, D.C.
yeah, and it's a lot of the things, as you know, Patrick, that T works on as well. The affordability message, the reliability, how it's clean. And those are all things that I think we have a lot in common.
Absolutely. Look, T is at the forefront. I'll be honest with you. I'm not aware of many other grassroots groups that are out there doing the things that you are. And it's so important to educate people about America's energy future. You need energy that's going to be affordable. You need energy that's going to be reliable. And we also have to have energy independence. And obviously with natural gas, that plays a huge role in that. And one of my goals has always been to look at different ways to make the product more available here domestically. And then ultimately, you want to look at the overseas markets as well, because there's no reason why America shouldn't be dominating overseas. If you look at Utica and Marcellus, wow, we're sitting on so much natural gas. The prices should be a bit lower than what they are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that. And you talked a little bit about, things that Congress has done and to Build Back Better too. And now we have the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, which at this point, maybe they're all the same. I don't, I don't know. As always, there's a lot of varying positions on things like this. And there was a deal cut to get something passed through the Senate. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think the impacts could be on the state of West Virginia?
Yeah, this bill, whatever you're going to call it, I know people try to call it inflation reduction. We said that's nonsense. So it's an iteration of the Build Back Better policy that Biden's been pushing for so long. And I think part of the reason I'm so worried about it for West Virginia and for our country is not even just the inflation. Certainly there'll be inflation and we're spending money that we can't afford right now. But beyond that, what it really is doing to a state like West Virginia is there's no real plan here. There's going to be a massive shock to the system when you try to move forward with Green New Deal policies in a truncated period of time. What happens is that citizens end up paying. And let me give you some specific examples of that. Let's say you have a state like West Virginia where we have a growing natural gas industry. It's phenomenal and it's naturally been increasing over time. And then you also have coal that's been in place. If you have policies that are pushing back against natural gas and coal, and then you're forcing other renewables into the mix, as your energy mix as a state changes, obviously a lot of that gets driven through the utilities. Prices are going to go up. And usually what you look for are smooth transitions. If you force things to change too quickly, consumers pay through the nose. So that's what I'm most worried about with this Build Back Better nonsense, that you have a real effort to change everything overnight, when naturally you look at what natural gas has been doing over the years and its growth over time, especially here in West Virginia. There's a natural trajectory about how the market should react. And I'm a strong advocate for that, instead of saying, hey, we're going to completely flip the nature of the energy that we're consuming here in West Virginia. And oh, by the way, you have to do it in a couple of years and you're going to triple your power bills. That's what I'm most worried about. Obviously, the spending is outrageous. The inflation is bad. There are tax increases. Don't let anyone tell you that they're not. And that's just terrible for our economy. West Virginia relies on competitive electricity rates, and the less affordable energy becomes, the harder it is for West Virginia to grow its manufacturing base and its economy.
Yeah, you said a key word in there, and that's market. And, me personally, T, we are a let the market decide. Let the market decide, and government should not be picking winners and losers, especially from an energy standpoint, because the point that you just made, consumers suffer if the government gets in the way and does that.
Well, look, they really do suffer. And, if you go back and you look at some of the policies that the far left have advanced in years, whether you're talking about natural gas and the shutdown of pipelines or coal, communities are hurting badly. I'll give the Atlantic Coast Pipeline was a good example. We got very involved. We actually filed and led a brief at the U.S. Supreme Court, and the court agreed with our arguments on the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, but then ultimately the companies decided not to proceed. But one of the things we were pointing out is that within 7 of the counties where the pipeline went through, West Virginia was really poised for some incredible things. Yes, it was going to get tax revenue, but even more importantly, the counties were looking to use the resources that were coming in to hire more police to deal with the opioid epidemic, to deal with efforts to drive the economy further. And that was really, everyone was excited about that. And to really secure West Virginia's place going forward, because it was an opportunity of a lifetime. And then you had some people come in and file lawsuits that ultimately proved to be incorrect. But what happened is that they bled these companies out because folks saw that, hey, if I can slow the project down and it make people pay billions more than what they originally budgeted, it's not going to be economically feasible. But, that's an example of something that really hurt West Virginians. There were 1,500 contractors looking for more work, and there were other regular jobs that would be in place, and that just all went away. And those are real good paying jobs that help families, and they fuel the community. So, we have to be mindful of that. And that's why I'm so aggressive in fighting against this regulatory overreach, because I look at what these people are doing and they're really hurting West Virginia families.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's kind of almost unique that you think about pipeline development that either has been proposed in West Virginia or pipelines that have been built in Ohio. The Appalachian Basin can push gas to different markets to serve people. And to the volume that they're able to do that is just mind-blowing compared to what it used to be.
Well, it really is. And that's why you actually need ready mechanisms to distribute that energy to all the right places. Remember what happened about a year ago with the cyber attacks on one of the pipelines, and everything came to a halt, and the price at the pump went through the roof, right? I mean, people take a lot of things for granted. We need to have the right system of transportation modules to be able to transport the natural gas, the energy from one state to another. And West Virginia is really at the center of it. So that's why having these pipelines are so important, and obviously taking advantage of the natural energy that we have.
Yep, absolutely. Completely agree with you, sir. This episode of the Empowering America podcast is brought to you by the Common Sense Energy newsletter. Delivered to your inbox every Friday at noon, the Common Sense Energy newsletter keeps you up to date on everything that's happening with American energy. To sign up for the Common Sense Energy newsletter, please visit empoweringamerica.org/sign-up and let us know how you heard about us. Once again, that's empoweringamerica.org/sign-up. Common Sense Energy, your weekly dose of Common Sense Energy news. And that is a good description of what the Empowerment Alliance is, Common Sense Energy. And Patrick, I think that's where you are too. Bring some common sense back into what we're doing.
Well, amen. And I love your newsletter, and it's chock filled with information. And if people are looking to stay on top of what's going on in these energy policy debates, and there are many of them, your newsletter is a great resource. So that's why, I'm really thrilled to be on. I think this is the first time that I'm on your podcast. So this is just a great opportunity to talk about so many big issues, but that impact West Virginia and American families. Yeah. And so it's great to have a chance to chat about it and educate folks across the country.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. So let's talk a little bit more about, you mentioned federal overreach a little bit ago, and you were at the forefront of a lawsuit challenging the US EPA's authority to regulate carbon emissions.
Yeah.
And I just would love to take the opportunity here for you to talk about that suit. But then I think I know the answer to the first part of the question is what drove you to be the lead on it?
Sure. Absolutely. Well, first of all, this was an incredible case. It's called West Virginia v. EPA, and it was one of the landmark cases of the most recent Supreme Court term. But it's actually an issue that has been pending for about 9 years or so. So if you go back, when I first became Attorney General back in 2013, I asked my staff to start to look really in depth at President Obama's ideas and proposals, where he was trying to foist a so-called clean power plan on the American Republic. And we knew that there were real problems with that. And when we first started to look at how he was trying to do it, we said, wait a minute, we don't think he has the legal authority to do it. And so right away, when I became Attorney General in 2013, I said, we need to take a close look. And as the more we looked at that, we knew that this is something, this Obama Clean Power Plan, if it were ever to be finalized, would hurt West Virginia. So we dove in and we started to work, quite frankly, with some of my other colleagues in Oklahoma and in Texas and a number of states across the nation. And we found, we had some really good lawyers. And this really mattered to West Virginia because we saw that they were really targeting fossil fuels. They were targeting gas. They were targeting oil. They were targeting coal. And obviously, the West Virginia economy is really dependent upon those. And so we knew that we had to step up and fight. And that's, in fact, what we did. So back in 2014, we filed our first lawsuit against the EPA with respect to the Clean Power Plan. And we didn't prevail, and it was deemed to be premature. And but we knew that West Virginia was going to get hurt by a lot of what the Obama administration was doing. But we lost that case in the D.C. Circuit. We followed up, and we filed again, actually, because the Obama administration issued a proposed rule which articulated its Clean Power Plan. They published it in the Federal Register. But it wasn't finalized yet, technically, but they did it. They got it out there in order to really start to drive the marketplace toward their goals. And that's something that a lot of these regulators do. They actually announce a proposal, and they want the market to move, even if you have no statutory authority to push in a particular direction. That's what we saw the Obama administration doing. So we filed the second time. We lost the second time. So what did we do? Well, we came back when it was finalized, and we filed the third time in the D.C. Circuit. Now, this time we lost in D.C., but then we went up to the U.S. Supreme Court in 2016, and we obtained a stay of the Clean Power Plan that Obama put in place. And this was huge because we thought it gave a respite not only to coal, but to all fossil fuels. And we were sending a real clear message. If you're going to regulate in the environmental space, you have to do so consistent with the law. Then 2017 comes. We had served as a bridge for the Trump administration. We worked with them. Fast forward, the Trump administration puts rules in place. We thought that they were legal. We helped them defend that. But in January of 2021, at the D.C. Circuit, for the fourth time, we lose. There's a good message at the end of this, but
right.
2-1. I think we had 2 Obama appointees and 1 Trump appointee. And then we thought that the grounds that they made their decision, that the EPA had virtually unlimited authority to act, were really spurious. So we said we're going to try to file a petition for cert up at the U.S. Supreme Court. And you know that that's really hard. But we thought it was critical to have our day at the Supreme Court. We knew we had won the stay at the Supreme Court in 2016, but there was no guarantee that we were going to take it up. Lo and behold, in October of 2021, the Supreme Court announces it's going to take the case. We argue the case in February of 22, and then, and this is the part I'm most fond of talking about, the end of June of 2022, we win West Virginia v. EPA. And for those listening, this case is really important, not only from an environmental perspective, but just if you care about the constitutional separation of powers in our country. All we are saying, and all we argued in this case, when the EPA was trying to aggressively move and act without authority, we said, when you have a major question of the day, something of vast economic and political significance, Congress gets to make the decision about whether to regulate. It's not up to these unelected bureaucrats to reach in and to seize power on their own. This is obviously very significant because there are a lot of agencies, even outside of the EPA, that reach out and try to seize authority that doesn't belong to them. Supreme Court indicated that forevermore, now that there'll be an independent review if there's a major question. That is just profound in terms of administrative law, separation of powers. And once again, it's not only good in terms of the environmental reviews, But if you care about fighting against these mandates, if you care about trying to ensure that government just doesn't grab power and that power remains with the elected officials in Congress, consistent with the Constitution, then this is your case, because it's a big win against the swamp. And we feel very positive that we're going to use it in a lot of cases going forward. And I'm proud of my team for working on it and all of the AGs. It's a team effort. We had 23 states involved in this, and then we've been at it for a long time. And I think it's going to be a really incredibly important case for a long time because of what it did in terms of that interplay between Congress and the EPA.
Yeah, that's great. Well, first of all, congratulations. The background and the history of it, and the persistency to finally keep chipping away. That's an incredible story, and you're right. It's a major case, and you mentioned using it, for the future. Do you see other things maybe coming from the federal government that would be a similar argument?
We do, in fact. But one thing I would add, this is also a good lesson that you have to have a little bit of intestinal fortitude, because we lost 4 times in the D.C. Circuit, and then we won twice at the U.S. Supreme Court. And we had a lot of people attacking us. Oh, what are you doing? And you're not winning in court. And ultimately, we really felt good we could win at the Supreme Court. Now, in terms of your question here, yes, and probably the most natural next case for the major questions doctrine is going to be this SEC rule that's coming out. Now, for those who haven't been following as closely, there's been a movement that's been underfoot for some time by a lot of people to move forward with ESG, this environmental social governance policy, where different companies get measured as to how green you are, and they look at your carbon footprint. Well, the Securities and Exchange Commission, as everyone listening probably knows, that's obviously the federal agency designed to protect investors. It's an investor enforcement arm for the country. Well, earlier this year, the SEC decided it was going to get in the business of proposing ESG rules and put certain requirements on publicly traded companies about what their direct carbon emissions were, what their indirect carbon emissions were, and also the nature of their distribution channel and what their carbon value and footprint is. And they lacked that authority. I mean, I think one of the reasons they did that is because we just stuffed them on the West Virginia EPA case, and they knew that they were in trouble. So they can't win on the substantive environmental regulations. So they're trying to use the tools of the SEC in order to whisper in the publicly traded companies' ears, a lot of the woke corporations, and say, you need to put measures in place in order to advance ESG. And the reason that's so important and so problematic is because, number one, you don't want government to actually be able to put the kind of pressure to transform companies into state actors. That's bad. I mean, we live in a republic. We don't live in a situation where the government gets to direct through a power play what companies do. That's not the way it should work. So that's the first part of it. And second, if you're successful, if you're the SEC in becoming a new environmental enforcer, what's to stop the SEC from becoming the new enforcer of diversity, of campaign contributions, of what kind of food you eat? I mean, there are real serious concerns when you're trying to empower these agencies to act so outside of their core mission. And so we think that if this rule gets finalized, this would be a perfect case for the major questions doctrine, because it certainly would reflect vast economic and political significance. And they're trying to write a rule that really should have nothing to do with the SEC, and therefore Congress should have to provide clear authority before the SEC or anyone else should act.
Yeah, I mean, I look at private sector. If that's what they want to do, if their focus is ESG and that is what a board or a CEO, they want to implement these programs, that's great. But to your point, though, the government needs to stay in its lane and not overreach its authority to be that enforcer and force companies to do certain or
right.
Meet certain ESG requirements.
Well, that's right. I mean, you want to make sure we live in a country where people have to comply with the rule of law. One of the things we found during the debate over the Clean Power Plan, we always thought that the EPA was wrong. They lacked the legal authority to act, but they ran around the country and said, wait a minute, we do have authority, but you should just act anyway. Come into compliance with the rules, even if the rule doesn't get upheld. And so they want to define the market on their terms. Well, we live in America. And in America, we want companies and individuals to be able to engage and make their own decision without the heavy hand of government forcing them to do policies that are not consistent with the rule of law. So that's where we come in. We're one of the tools, if you will, that's in the Constitution, the state stepping up and ensuring that we're fighting back against federal overreach. And I think that's what you've seen our office do and lead the way for many years.
Yeah. And, Patrick, I'll say again, job well done by you and your office. I think you were spot on when you say the responsibility of states, attorneys general in those respective states to hold government at bay and make sure that they don't overreach and they stay in their lane. I think that's very well said. And I greatly appreciate, and I know T greatly appreciates the work that you're doing in your office. So I appreciate the time that you've spent with me here. I've really enjoyed the conversation. And this will conclude our podcast. I want to thank West Virginia's Attorney General, Patrick Morrisey, for joining us today. Please remember to subscribe to the Empowering America podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and be sure to tune in to our next episode. Patrick, thank you very much.
Hey, and thank you so much for having me on. If folks want to learn more about me, you could go to tmorrisey.com, or you could look out. There are a lot of big cases coming. So I'm so grateful for you for taking the time and helping many people learn what's happening.
Well, we appreciate you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.